Welcome, everyone. I'm Rich Karlgaard, former publisher of Forbes, and now the publication's editor-at-large and futurist. And I'm so thrilled to be back at the Montgomery Summit, virtual as it is, and I hope we get the real event next year. But today I have a really terrific guest. It's Jennifer Tejada, CEO of PagerDuty, an innovative leader in the field of incident management. PagerDuty has a $200 million plus revenue run rate and a $4 billion market cap. Jen joined PagerDuty as CEO in 2016, and she took the company public in April of 2019. Welcome, Jen. Tell us about PagerDuty, the field of incident management, and why you do it and who you do it for.
Well, first of all, Rich, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here at the Montgomery Summit. PagerDuty was just this interesting business that I sort of stumbled upon that was doing something really important and mission critical at the time. And that was helping developers identify issues in their technology before they had an impact on customers, but doing it in a way that was really simple and easy to deploy, quick to deliver value, and extremely trustworthy. I mean, we have really built our business on the back of a high level of reliability and by bringing complex technology, but in a really simple, usable package for our users. And what's interesting is what's happened is developers have really influenced the way the rest of the world works. I mean, development teams were always distributed. They always were looking for the best, fastest, most efficient way to do things. And now we're all remote, we're all distributed, we're all living in almost an entirely digital world. And when all of your revenue relies on the complicated technology that supports digital outcomes, that means you've got to be able to quickly and automatically get in front of issues before they impact your business, your people, your employees, or your customers. And that, to me, is a really mission critical, wonderful mission to be on.
Well, tell us what prompted you to join the company as CEO in 2016, because you'd had an interesting background at Procter & Gamble, and you'd been a CEO before. What motivated you? What promise did you see in PagerDuty?
Well, I really wanted to lead a growth company. I wanted to get back to building. And what I saw in PagerDuty was a founding team that had identified a macro trend that was very early, and that was DevOps transformation and the move towards developers owning the products and services that they built in production and really becoming not just the subject matter expert, but the operational owner for these products and services. And back then, that was something that only a few companies were doing, progressive startups, Amazon, et cetera. But our co-founders bet that this was going to become a massive trend. And it's still an early and nascent market in that regard, but absolutely a trend that is taking on in the mainstream, from the largest financial services companies to the newest, most progressive and innovative startups. And so that was I saw this sort of early capture of this really incredible macro trend, which is now really a tailwind for PagerDuty. The second was, it was a company that was actually performing quite well, growing very fast, very cost efficient, capital efficient, but with a founding team that felt like they needed a leader who had experience to scale the business. So they had essentially made room for me, particularly Alex Solomon, who was the founder, very humble and very willing to step aside, hand me his title, essentially come work for me and with me on the board to really help the company reach its potential. And I think that's a really uncommon kind of high humility move that we don't see from a lot of founders today. The third was the culture. The culture is incredible at PagerDuty. It's very transparent and open and equitable to start with. And it was something that I felt like I could develop to help create a platform that would change the way technology organizations are run and operated and present themselves back to their communities. And then lastly, the product itself was very platform-esque. I mean, it was built around a high quality API environment, integratable and interoperable with just about every kind of modern technology out in the market, whether you're talking about IoT or software or infrastructure or ticketing systems, applications, you name it. Super easy to use, almost consumer-esque in the way the application works, but very extensible. And what was really interesting when I interviewed customers before I took the job was many of them had already found new use cases beyond DevOps for PagerDuty. And that kind of applicability that kind of leads to potentially a ubiquity opportunity, the opportunity to apply your products and services to lots of different problems across an enterprise. And that was very exciting to me.
Well, this ease of use in enterprise software, I think, had been long predicted. When would we have Apple-like interfaces in enterprise software? But there has emerged over the past few years a range of companies like ServiceNow and PagerDuty and others that finally have achieved that. And I think just at the right time with COVID, because the one thing I hear from CFOs is, and it was proven in 2020, is it will continue to spend money on transformative information technology, but the ROI has to be blazingly fast. I mean, weeks, not months, no big waterfall projects anymore. Describe what it was like when the COVID anvil really hit on the economy, then what you did internally at PagerDuty, and then what your customers were asking of you that they didn't ask before.
Well, I absolutely agree with you that it's long been predicted that enterprise technology was going to be consumerized and be easier to use. What I would say is it's hard to do. If you are not natively designed for a frictionless land, trial, expand, user-oriented usage environment, it's very hard to retroactively build. And that was one of the other things that attracted me to PagerDuty was the fact that our developers come to us pretty well informed. They try our product, they buy it, they're up and running in minutes, not weeks, not months. There's no professional services. It's really easy to use. And we've had a third party audit the ROI for our enterprises, and it's a 4-month payback over 800% ROI, right? And so very quick time to value in that regard. And what I would tell you was the pandemic really helped us to see, one, how PagerDuty had become mission critical infrastructure for a lot of our companies or a lot of our customers. Two, that despite the fact that a lot of the businesses that we serve were going through massive transformation under significant pressure, they were still looking for ways to improve their infrastructure, to automate what their people had to do, to try and automate more and more of these processes. But they recognized in digital transformation, what we now think of as digital acceleration, that it's getting the work done in seconds and milliseconds and minutes, not days and weeks and months. And a lot of the workflow systems out in the market are really oriented around ticketing and ticketing queues. By the time a ticket is raised by a human and moved through multiple points in a queue through a command and control kind of approval process, it's too late for the digital customer that wants to transact or interact with their brand in a matter of 1 or 2 minutes. And so having a platform that moves really fast, that automates a lot of what traditionally has had to be managed by humans, really became a strength for us. Having said that, when the pandemic hit, it was right before earnings. One of the first decisions was, should we provide guidance or not? Should we suspend guidance? And I'm really proud that we took the courageous step to, hold and continue to provide guidance as opposed to withdraw it, even though we had a lot of unpredictability and volatility in front of us. The second thing was, our employees looked to us for information, for guidance on how to stay safe and on what to expect. We sent the entire workforce home globally in the first week of March, ahead of a lot of companies who were kind of taking, I think, more incremental steps. And we were lucky that we were ready for that because we already work in a distributed environment. At the time, 20% of our employees were remote, and we already leverage a lot of systems like PagerDuty that support distributed asynchronous work. And so that was, I think, a little bit of an advantage. Having said that, our SMB businesses were hit very hard. I mean, I remember that second quarter, just seeing kind of pipeline just start to come to almost a screeching halt. And a lot of enterprise customers that said to us, look, we need to get laptops out to our employees, and then we'll turn to discussions, around big transformative deals. But right now we're just in survival mode. And, sort of the shock of all that and wondering, okay, well, what's that going to mean for the business long term? I'm really proud of how our employees showed up because they really kept the customer at the center of everything we did and led with empathy and listened to the challenges of our customers, whether they were, tiny restaurateurs or large multinational organizations. And I think we really put the relationship in front of short-term revenue gains. And that's one of the reasons that most of our customers have very long-term relationships with us. But it was by no means an easy year.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit more about that trial of fire, because it's one of the things I admire about your leadership and about PagerDuty. And it has to do with that component of the trial that was reflected by the stock market. You went public in April 2019. You priced at $24. I think you ended your first trader, you ended the first day at $39. And then when the COVID landslide hit the markets, you're all the way down to $12, or 70% down from where you were on your first day as a public company. I mean, as if losing a lot of your SMB customers in the pipeline wasn't challenge enough. How do you keep a workforce motivated when they are when the stock price is that far down?
Well, I was a competitive golfer growing up, and golf is all about playing the long game, right? And not letting a single shot keep you from, keeping your mind and your body and your game together over the long term. And sometimes you're playing 18, 36, 72 holes. And if you let sort of one setback cause you mentally to lose sight of where you're really trying to go in the long term, you lose to yourself, not to any competitor, not to any challenge. And we always said, even before we went public, I used to tell the employees that our initial public offering was really like planning a wedding. There's going to be a lot of hoopla. There's going to be a big party. It's going to be a point in time. It's going to be a lot of fun. But as soon as that's behind us, we're going to be focused on the marriage. And that marriage is, decades long. This is about like making sure that every day we do a little bit better. And there are going to be days when the stock is up, despite us having a bad day in the office. There are going to be days when the stock is down, despite us having a great day in the office. Those two things are not directly correlated. I used to tell the employees, like, don't look at the stock every day. Certainly don't look at it multiple times a day. But again, kind of it's a long game. And I got to tell you, I've been doing this for a long time. I still don't entirely understand how the stock market works. So I don't like it as a short-term indicator of our progress. But I think the important thing was our employees are aligned around our mission and our purpose. And they know that our customers, when they're having a bad day, they need to be us to be up and available, their eyes, their ears, and more importantly, automating the work, the incidents, the issues, and the opportunities that are time sensitive, unpredictable, unstructured, and getting that done seamlessly, again, before their business is impacted or their customers are impacted. So staying focused on that and being sort of consistent on what was important to us, winning an enterprise, becoming the de facto digital operations management platform, et cetera. Like that sort of kept people going. And I think when you start with a foundation of this everyday stock thing is not what we're working towards. What we're working towards is building a legacy as a company that people will remember as having them help transform their business and transform people's careers and also have a big impact on our community. And when you stay focused on those things, some of the smaller setbacks just don't matter as much.
Well, the market has sure come around. I mean, because you quadrupled since hitting the low in March in 2020, and the marketplace really began, the stock market really began to take notice of all the good things you had done starting in the fall of 2020. You said that when you arrived in 2016 as CEO, that there was already this culture, but you've been CEO coming up, you will come up on 5 years this year. What you're a larger company, you're publicly traded, still a lot of run room ahead, but what imprints have you brought as CEO to the culture of PagerDuty?
Well, you're right. There is still an incredible runway in front of us. And I'm a big believer in looking out to the future and building towards it, as opposed to resting on, the laurels and the things that have made us successful to this point. So, number one is always to stay focused on where we want to be in 3 years, in 5 years, in even 10 years. What is that going to mean for our customers? How do we anticipate what they're going to need over time? And how do we continue to build and design for the user as opposed to a top-down sale to a senior executive, et cetera? And how do we continue to make sure that's very clear to our customers where we add value and how important we are. And I'm proud of what we've done so far, but I think we have a lot more to do as you think about how the whole world is digitized and how real time has a new meaning. Again, we're talking about seconds and milliseconds, not days, weeks, and years. How important it is for these nimble solutions to support people in getting mission critical work done. So when I think about the culture and the imprint that I've made, I think one is identifying talented people and then putting them in a position to do what they do really well. And I'm really proud of how we've deepened the talent bench at just about every level at PagerDuty and also created a lot of career opportunities for people. The second thing is I really believe any person has an equal opportunity or should have an equal opportunity to kill it in their career, and that PagerDuty should be a place where they feel safe, qualified, and supported in that opportunity. So creating an equitable, inclusive organization that gives people the opportunity to have that sense of belonging, but also be able to be curious and try new things. I mean, one of the things we really celebrate inside of PagerDuty is when someone moves from their current specialty to an entirely different role within the business, when they move from an individual contributor to a manager. I think growing in your career is really important. And I also think it's one of the most rewarding parts of being a leader. And then finally, I think it's important that all of us as leaders set examples of building platforms and organizations that reflect the communities that we serve. And so I'm pretty vocal and outbound around how important I think gender equality is, how important I think diversity at the board level, at senior management level is. And, we do have a gender balanced board and leadership team. We are building our people of color community within the business and within our leadership ranks. And we still have a ton of work to do, but we are not going to stop. And, whenever we do kind of get one of these things right, we try and open source what we've learned and the programmatic approaches that we've taken so that others can come with us on that journey. So I think it's as much about creating your own success as a company as it is about lifting the entire industry up around you.
Let me test an idea. It's a personal theory of mine, is that the age of the autocratic CEO was on the wane anyway, and COVID really pretty much killed it. What I mean is that even successful but autocratic CEOs like Steve Jobs or Steve Ballmer, or to mention somebody more controversial like Travis Kalanick, their day was sort of setting. The sun was setting on them because of Glassdoor and the way that people could really peer into the culture of a company and figure out whether they wanted to work at that company or not. And then came COVID, and COVID has called for a different kind of leadership, one that is where there's much more empathy, there's much more, it's motivational across the whole company, where it's much more all the kinds of things you're talking about in terms of equity. Because I think wise leaders, the empathetic leader knows today that some significant percentage of their workforce is having a difficult time. They may be parents with kids at home, which shrunk the size of the house, when you're all staying at home, trying to go to school and work from home. It could be any number of things. And so do you perceive that? And do you think that is an important recognition in the way you build people into leaders at PagerDuty?
Well, I think the digitization of kind of modern society has created a lot more transparency, right? Whether it's Glassdoor or any type of rating and recommendation site, the ability to reference and back channel any person or any product that you need to has become so accessible to just about everybody. But I also think that as a leader, our stakeholder community has broadened. So not only am I responsible for my customers and my investors, but equally my employees and their safety, our partners, and increasingly the communities that we are around, that we serve, that we work and live in. Like I feel like I have a responsibility as a leader to leave any community that my company touches, whether it's because we have an office there, or because we have customers there, or we have employees there, better than the way we found it. And COVID presented a whole bunch of new and unprecedented challenges that we hadn't seen before, not the least of which are young employees coming to us for advice on what they should do and how they should live, and whether they needed to be worried about their parents, how they should think about protecting themselves and others from COVID, how they should think about their careers and work when their social center was disappearing, when the offices were closed. Or likewise, our dual income working parents who, to your point, suddenly were living in a very small house, homeschooling a lot of children and trying to figure out how to balance two careers and live inside of, this wonderful solution that is Zoom, that's kind of kept us all running, to people who are isolated, who are working and living by themselves suddenly, and finding the loneliness of that extraordinarily challenging. So I do think that empathy is a really important part of leadership, and kind of my starting point. Like, every single person in my company certainly is experiencing COVID and the pandemic and the associated recession differently or uniquely. And so I can't make assumptions that like one solution is going to solve things for everybody. I can't point to trying to solve the problems for a majority and leave a minority underserved either. You really have to try and understand the tapestry of the obstacles and barriers and challenges that are out there, and then help teams and help customers kind of help themselves. And one of the things that I'm very proud of is not only the way my team has come together to try and help improve the situation for our customers and for their fellow employees, et cetera, but also how my colleagues and my peers, other CEOs, other companies, how we've all come together to try and sort of get through this and come out the other side in a better position, whether it's openly sharing ideas and solutions, or helping each other out by bringing experts, epidemiologists, people to the table that can help our employees and our customers move forward faster.
What's your assumption about what the new normal is when COVID is in the rearview mirror? Is it a hybrid of pre-COVID and COVID? Is it going back to pre-COVID? Is it, how do you foresee that both at PagerDuty and with your customer base? And having said that, I realize you have a broad range of customers, large and small and medium, and across a variety of industries.
Yeah, I've learned to try not to make too many assumptions, and rather, look at data and see how I can interpret that data, and then sort of run experiments to figure things out. And what I would tell you is, I don't think there's any going back to the way we were. Society is changed, and changed in some permanent way. But what that way is, I'm not entirely sure of. What I do know is that humans generally like to spend time together. And that loneliness thing that I was mentioning before, it's real. And for people to perform at their best, they need to feel engaged, they need to be supported, they need to be aligned in a mission that excites them, they need to do work that is rewarding. Just like consumers who engage with brands want some gratification from that relationship. So, I absolutely believe that we're going to benefit from what we've learned in working remotely and working asynchronously, and finding some efficiencies in that. And equally, I know there are people in my teams and my customer base that are starving for interaction and collaboration and warmth, and just that that human socialization and engagement that that many of us feel is important in enjoying what we do and enjoying our jobs. So I like to think that rather than going back to something, or it being black and white, and going towards something that it's entirely different, we're evolving, and we're evolving at a much faster pace than we would have had COVID not happened. And you've heard many people say it, that you see a lot of digital acceleration that has historically we thought would take years, happening in months. I think that's going to continue to be the case. And my hope for our industry, and for PagerDuty and for PagerDuty's customers, is that we take what we learn and we continue to innovate at a fast pace, but at the same time, leverage some of what worked well in the past and kind of bring that forward. So I'm pretty excited to get on a plane and, get back out around the world and see what's going on outside of my little Zoom room here. But at the same time, I hope I won't ever have to travel at the levels that I was traveling before COVID, because there's a lot that I can get done over the phone or over Zoom.
Yeah, well, from your lips to God's ears on all of that, I share what I hope the new normal looks like. Well, tell us about you, the making of Jen Tejada. You grew up in Minnesota. You like many surprising number of tech moguls. Steve Ballmer, Steve Case, Meg Whitman are an alumnus of Procter and Gamble.
Yes. I was very lucky. I kind of accidentally landed at P&G right after I graduated from the University of Michigan, which I do believe is the greatest university in the world. And P&G taught me so many fundamental lessons around leadership, how to build a vision, engage others in a vision, about consumers, and how to really think inside the mind of a consumer, and how to build products and services that really develop love, a sort of love connection. And that's one of the things that I've always loved about PagerDuty is, users really love it and rely on it, and sometimes hate it because it wakes them up in the middle of the night. And I also learned about the importance of being good to other people, and not only trying to hire the best people, but hire people that bring out the best in others, which means there really isn't room for brilliant assholes. There really isn't room for disruptive personalities, but at the same time, you want to build the kind of trust that allows teams to challenge each other, to debate, to not necessarily agree with each other. And I am most comfortable around people who are willing to challenge me, even if they might not think I like it. I like people who raise my game. And again, I go back to the golf game. If I've got to pick 3 people for a foursome, I'm always going to try and pick 3 people who are better than me. So I have to stretch to play at their level, as opposed to 3 people that, I can beat handily. And those were some of those early lessons from Procter & Gamble, but I love the pace of innovation in tech. I like solving problems that maybe some people don't even realize are problems yet. I like the aha moment in a person's eyes when they realize they did something that you asked them to do and they thought it was initially ridiculous, and they've not only delivered on it, but exceeded our expectations. And so, I feel like one of the luckiest people in the world. I have a wonderful job at a place with people who are really smart. And my career wasn't really well designed for what I do. I have a liberal arts degree from a state school. I started in consumer marketing. I've worked in telecommunications and marketing and communications and private equity and investing, et cetera. So turning up running a deep tech SaaS company probably isn't what people expect from me, but it really does scratch my intellectual curiosity itch. And, at the end of the day, I look for products and services that are highly quantifiable in solving material challenges for customers. And so, that for me, it's a great fit.
Well, Bill Joy and Larry Page, I think, are University of Michigan graduates too. So you walk with some giants there. We're coming toward the end of our time here. So maybe just the last question. You've made it pretty clear you don't like to speculate too much on the future, but where would you like PagerDuty to be in 3 years or 5 years?
Well, I see a number of trends that I think serve as very strong tailwinds for PagerDuty, and I've talked about these in the public before. But one is DevOps transformation, and we're very early in this cycle where developers have increasingly more and more influence in a company and how its brand shows up from a digital and product perspective, in how the company itself operates and the efficiency with which it operates. And I think we're early days in that transformation. And I think we're going to continue to be a leader in that movement, in supporting developers in building and managing some of the best and most innovative services in the world. The second area is cloud computing and cloud adoption. Again, very early in that market transformation, and the cloud creates a tremendous amount of opportunity and democratization, but at the same time, it's really hard. And I think our customers certainly rely on us to help them with that operational transformation. And so I think that's something that we're going to continue to see make a meaningful difference, whether it facilitates, the Internet of Things, or it facilitates autonomous vehicles, et cetera. All of those things are running on software, and we make sure that software runs effectively so that those products and services get delivered the way they were imagined. And then the last thing I'd talk about is digital acceleration. I think this is the beginning of something really incredible in how just about every part of society and business transforms because of the opportunity that cloud and digital create. And I'm kind of excited about what's in front of us. And one thing I always promise new leaders when they join PagerDuty is that they will never be bored. And I think there is no risk of that.
Yeah, everybody I've talked to who's smart, like you, including Diane Green when she was CEO of Google Cloud, or Scott Guthrie who runs Microsoft Azure, or Pat Gelsinger when he was at VMware, and now of course he's back at Intel as CEO, has said the same thing, that you didn't quantify, but I hear it deeply, is that the pace of digital evolution is running 2 to 3 times faster than it did in the 50-year reign when Moore's law was the governing pace car. And it's an extraordinary time, as you said. Well, thank you so much for joining us today at the Montgomery Summit, Jennifer Tejada.
Well, it's my pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me.